The glass boardroom doors slammed open as security rushed past, their shoes pounding against the marble floor. Daniel Crawford shot to his feet, heart racing, anger boiling in his chest. "You can't let them in without clearance," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. But then he froze. A woman stepped through the doorway like she owned the building. Calm, unshaken, powerful. Her heels clicked slowly against the floor, each step echoing like a countdown to something irreversible. The entire boardroom fell silent. Daniel's mouth went dry. "You," he whispered under his breath. She met his eyes with steady confidence. "Good afternoon, Mr. Crawford. I believe this meeting concerns the acquisition of your company." His stomach dropped. 3 years earlier, she had stood in this same building wearing cheap office flats and carrying a second-hand laptop bag, praying this internship would change her life. Back then, her name barely mattered to anyone. Back then, she was invisible. On her first day, she had stood outside Daniel's office rehearsing words under her breath. "You can do this. Just speak clearly. Don't sound nervous." Her hands had been shaking as she knocked. "Come in," Daniel's voice had said without warmth. She stepped inside, clutching her notebook. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I won't disappoint you." He barely looked up from his tablet. "Just do your sign work. That's all interns are expected to do." "Yes, sir," she said, forcing a smile. Weeks passed. She worked harder than anyone else. She stayed late. She skipped lunch. She volunteered for extra tasks nobody wanted. She studied company reports at night while working a part-time job to pay rent. Then one afternoon, everything changed. She had discovered a flaw in one of the company's expansion strategies. Not a small mistake, a dangerous one that could cost millions. Her heart pounded as she entered the executive meeting room, invited only because she had insisted. Daniel looked annoyed. "Make this quick. We're busy." She swallowed. "Sir, I reviewed the South Asia expansion plan, and I think the debt structure might collapse if interest rates shift even slightly. I ran alternative models." He laughed, not loudly, but enough. One executive smirked. Her chest tightened. "Sir, I'm serious. If you look at page..." "I said enough," Daniel cut in. "You're an intern, not an analyst, not a strategist. An intern." The room went quiet. "I was only trying to help," she said softly. Daniel leaned back. "Here's some advice. Focus on getting coffee orders right before trying to save companies." A few people chuckled. Her face burned. "Yes, sir." Later that day, she overheard him in the hallway talking to another executive. "These interns come in thinking they're geniuses," he said. "Most of them won't last a year in the real world." That was the moment something inside her changed. That night, sitting in her tiny apartment, she stared at her resignation email for almost an hour. "If I send this, I have nothing," she whispered to herself. Then she hit send. The months that followed were brutal. She worked 2 jobs, slept 4 hours most nights, taught herself financial modeling through free online courses, reached out to investors who ignored her emails, built business plans that failed, launched ideas that flopped. More than once, she cried on public buses after rejection emails. "Maybe he was right," she whispered once, staring at her reflection in a bus window. "Maybe I'm not built for this." But she kept going. Then came the breakthrough. A small logistics software tool she built started getting attention from mid-sized companies, then bigger ones, then international ones. Within a year, she had a small but profitable company. Within 2 years, she had investors chasing her. Within 3, she was leading one of the fastest-growing tech infrastructure firms in the region. Meanwhile, Daniel's empire was cracking. At first, it was small losses, then bigger ones, risky acquisitions, over-leveraged debt, investors pulling out quietly, then loudly. "I need solutions, not panic," Daniel barked at his executives during one emergency meeting. "Sir, we warned you about the debt exposure," one said carefully. "Then fix it," he shouted. But they couldn't. News outlets started circling. Stock prices fell. Partners backed out. The company that once dominated markets was suddenly drowning. Then came the offer. A private firm wanted to acquire majority control and inject capital. Daniel was desperate but hopeful. "Who are they?" he asked his legal team. They prefer to reveal during final negotiations. Now, back in the present, he stared across the boardroom table at the woman he once dismissed. She placed a folder on the table. I'll get straight to the point. I'm acquiring 78% controlling stake. Existing leadership will be reviewed. Daniel forced a shaky laugh. This is some kind of joke, right? She tilted her head. Does this look like a joke? His voice cracked. Why are you doing this? She leaned forward slightly. 3 years ago, I walked into your office hoping to learn. Instead, I learned something else. He swallowed. Look, if this is about the past. It's not, she said calmly. This is business. Silence swallowed the room. But, she added softly, you did teach me something valuable. He looked up slowly. What? She met his eyes. Never let someone else decide how small you are. Daniel felt something collapse inside his chest. Please, he said quietly. What happens to me? She studied him for a long moment. Then she said, that depends on what you become next. The boardroom stayed silent as the weight of her words settled over everyone. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Crawford realized power could disappear in a single moment. And sometimes, the people you overlook are the ones who return holding your future in their hands. If you watched to this point, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. The meeting ended, but the tension didn't. Daniel sat at his desk, staring blankly at the skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The hum of the city below felt distant, like he was watching someone else's life. His assistant peeked in. Sir, she's not leaving until the paperwork is signed. He ran his hands through his hair. I thought I had more time. I never expected her. His voice trailed off. The arrogance he had carried for decades had evaporated like smoke. Meanwhile, she walked calmly down the corridor, past employees who whispered and stared. Some recognized her from the early days, when she was just the quiet intern with a second-hand laptop and oversized notebooks. Their eyes widened in awe. She did it, one whispered. She actually did it. She didn't smile. Not yet. She had a company to run, people to protect, and a lesson to make crystal clear. 3 years ago, she had sat in a cramped apartment, staring at her bank balance, wondering if she would ever rise. Rejection had burned her. Humiliation had scarred her, but it had also fueled something fiercer than anger, determination. Every late night, every cold coffee, every whispered, maybe I'm not good enough, had built her into someone nobody could ignore. Back in the boardroom, Daniel called a meeting with his remaining executives. They sat tensely, avoiding eye contact. She's buying us, he said finally, voice low. We have to cooperate. For now. Sir, she's not the same person, one whispered. I know, he said, his jaw tight. And I never imagined this day would come. I should have seen it before. The woman wasn't cruel. She had no interest in petty revenge. But she had eyes that saw everything. Ambition, laziness, arrogance. And she had no patience for mistakes she could prevent. We will restructure, we will stabilize, and we will protect our employees, she told the board. And anyone unwilling to adapt will not be part of this company. Daniel sat quietly, feeling the weight of every word. He remembered telling her to fetch coffee, to stay in her place, to stop thinking she could have impact. And here she was, commanding the fate of the empire he had built. The first week under her control was intense. She walked through every department, asking questions, listening, observing. Some employees feared her, unsure she would wield her power harshly. Others admired her, noting her attention to detail, her genuine care for the people who had worked through the chaos. Daniel followed her everywhere, silently. At first, he tried to interject, to guide, to show he still had knowledge to offer. She listened politely, then gently reminded him that advice was welcome, but orders would come from her now. Each time, a little more of his ego chipped away. One afternoon, she walked past his old corner office and paused. It's still beautiful, she said almost softly. Daniel shrugged. It's yours now, she said. No anger, no gloating, just power, quiet but absolute. That night, Daniel sat alone, staring at the city lights. His mind replayed the moments he had dismissed her brilliance. He thought about the interns he ignored, the employees he undervalued, and the countless times he believed arrogance was strength. And he realized it wasn't strength, it was fragility. Across town, she sat in her temporary office, reviewing company books. The numbers were grim, but not impossible. She made notes, outlined a plan, and felt a small flicker of satisfaction. Not because of revenge, but because she had taken control of her destiny and saved what needed saving. The employees began to notice changes immediately. Communication improved. Decisions were quicker. Morale shifted. And Daniel, for the first time in his life, learned what it meant to be managed by someone who refused to see anyone as less than. Weeks passed. The company began to recover. Media outlets published stories about the former intern who saved a billionaire company, but she didn't care about the headlines. She cared about the people, the work, and proving to herself that she was more than anyone's dismissal. Finally, she called Daniel in her office. "I want to make something clear," she said. "I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to ensure that the company survives. You have a choice. Be part of this as a contributor or step aside." Daniel nodded slowly, a lump in his throat. "I understand. I made mistakes. I underestimated you." You did," she said simply. "And now you get to choose what kind of person you want to be moving forward. Humility or bitterness." For the first time in his life, Daniel was speechless. He looked around the room at the polished floors, the organized papers, the employees working efficiently, and realized that the real lesson wasn't about money or power. It was about respect and the consequences of ignoring potential in people who had drive and vision. She stood, extended a hand, and said, "Let's rebuild this together." He hesitated, then took it, not because he had power anymore, but because he wanted to learn. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of a new chapter, one where arrogance didn't rule and resilience was rewarded. Outside, the sun set over the city skyline, casting long shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a few people whispered about the woman who had turned the tables on a billionaire. But she didn't care. She had already won. The real victory wasn't the company. It was proving that determination, intelligence, and courage could change destiny itself. And Daniel? He finally understood that sometimes the people you underestimate aren't the ones who fail. They're the ones who rise quietly and change everything.